Hairdressers of Reddit, what is the most disturbing thing you've ever found on someone's head? I've only had 2 disturbing discoveries, thank God. Both happened when I was in cosmetology school. The first wasn't too bad, just weird. This lady came in for a cut, and when I put my fingers in her hair, I found tons of twigs and leaves inside. Her hair was fairly thick, and there were just tons of twigs tangled up in there. I made a comment about it and she just laughed. Really strange. The second time was disgusting. A different lady came in for a cut and I took her to the shampoo bowl and started shampooing. After a minute of that, I noticed a spot on her scalp that felt funny, so I parted the hair and she had this huge wound that was oozing pus and blood. I almost threw up on her head. I had to go get an instructor. I had just started working on real clients at this time and was quite shy to explain to her why I couldn't continue her service, and she literally looked at us and said, "Well, it's not even that bad. I don't understand why you can't just cut my hair anyway." She had to leave wet and I spent a good 30 minutes scrubbing my hands and nails afterwards. My aunt was a hairdresser and had a client who had these little soft spots in her head with scars above them. The client was a bit dotty, as my aunt affectionately put it, and very fixated on my aunt to make sure the scars were covered. The lady would get a perm each visit, so she spent quite a while there, and my aunt always assumed she might have early dementia or something, but adored her because she was very sweet and fun to talk to. It wasn't until the client's son was there during a visit that aunt found out her client had been lobotomized as a young housewife, and that was what the soft spots were from. My friends were shaving each other's heads, early 80s punk rock, and one of them had a large pimple they popped and a BB came out. When they were kids they would have BB gun walls, so they figured one got lodged in his scalp during battle. My friend Jen is a hairdresser and saw that this regular of hers, who was middle-aged guy, had a mole start to change. It suddenly had a gross looking kind of bleeding growth on it. She didn't remember being there before and told him he should probably get it checked. She didn't see him for almost a year and then he came in bald. She found stage 3 melanoma that he probably wouldn't have thought about. He told her she saved his life since there was an underlying tumor that could have spread to his brainstem or cervical spine and paralyzed or killed him. Your next client says her hair is really tangly and will need a lot of help combing it out, might have to cut out some knots. White high school girl comes in with a single dread that covers her entire head. I shit you not, it was like a giant hat that was one dread helmet. Told her I'd have to shave her head and she freaked out and left. Ex-hairdresser. 2 bad ones. We used to have a lady client who would sit in a room for about a month at a time and smoke at least 40 a day. Her hair was only ever washed by us, at the hairdressers. The only thing that was worse than the smell was the sticky tar that would be stuck in her hair. The water would be a deep brown and it would take about 4 washes. An old chap who had scruffy hair came in for a wash and cut. As I begin to wash his hair, my hand slips into a large gap in his skull. 1/4 of his head was missing, at least a tennis ball sized gap. Turns out he had a bad motorcycle accident and had to have brain surgery. A lot was removed. Heads up would have been good. I've got a whopping scar on the back of my head that only hairdressers see, and they almost always ask about it. It's actually a scar on top of a scar. I smashed my head on the exact same spot I once had surgery, both incidents requiring stitches. One said that it looks like something that should have killed me. I have 2. First one was in hair school. We had a lot of destitute people come in because the cuts were like $4. This lady sat in my chair for a cut/color. Her hair was impossibly ratted and it took me a good half an hour to finally remove the tangles. Once the brush strokes were fluid, I noticed a large bump on the back of her head. I moved her hair out of the way and it was a huge tumor that was red and the skin was cracking like crazy. Think, cutting a softball in half sized. She told me she'd been in the hospital for weeks waiting to have it tested and removed, and that's why her hair was so ratted. From laying in bed for so long, it took every bit of self-control. I had to control the gagging and not be sick all over that place. Next one was this high school aged girl who came in for foils. I mixed her color and got through maybe 3 foils when I noticed something moving on her scalp. I took a closer look and saw bugs all over her head. I had never seen lice in real life, so I called my friend, another hairstylist, over to confirm my suspicion. The client looked super nervous and said, "Are you about to tell me I have lice? I've been to 3 stylists this week and they all said that, but I haven't found any." I had to drop my tools, rush her to the shampoo bowl, rinse off the color and get her the FCK out of the salon. I couldn't believe this girl. If you have been to 3 stylists this week and they all said the same thing, why the FCK would you not believe them and come infect another salon? We had to disinfect the entire salon that day, chairs, capes, towels, tools. I was so pissed. But I did walk her down the street to a Sally's and get her the medication she needed. Hopefully she took it and didn't go trying another salon. Sheesh. Edit, a word. Grandmother was a hairdresser, and when I started driving she used to tell me the story of Priscilla Hudson to scare the crap out of me to respect the railroad tracks. Priscilla Hudson was an old woman who came into my grandma's shop. This was during the 60s and 70s, and she said this old woman had a scar that started on the middle of her cheek, went up through her eye and into the hairline. Upon fixing her hair, my grandma realized it went almost all the way to the back of her head. She had to ask what happened. Apparently she had gotten tired of waiting on the arm to lift up and didn't hear the train coming, I'd cow, and went around it. Her car got hit by the train, but she survived and got that gnarly scar. A year later Grandma gets a call from the family informing her Priscilla died and they wanted her to fix her hair for the funeral. She agreed, and when she came in to fix it she noticed she was stitched up in an identical manner on the other side of her face. Apparently she'd done it again and it killed her the second time. When I was in school a really strange woman came in for a scalp treatment. She gave me a weird vibe, but I couldn't turn down clients. The first thing I noticed about her was the overwhelming stench of BO and possibly rotten food. The second thing was that she had 2 large Little Caesars pizzas in her purse. They were stacked vertically. First sign there was something weird about her. She sits down and I go to check her scalp. Thank God I had the foresight to put on gloves, because this woman had a giant, oozing wound on her head. It was probably 3 inches wide and 5 to 6 inches long. It was oozing pus and other weird shit, and I swear to God I saw something moving in there. And the smell, that was partly where her stench was coming from. Smelled like rotting flesh and curdled milk. I obviously freaked out and told her I couldn't perform a service on her. She asked why and I told her she had a giant gash on her head that needed to be looked at by a doctor ASAP. She then proceeded to argue with me for about 15 minutes, saying that she didn't have anything of the sort and her head felt fine. I finally kicked her out, but holy shit, that image burned in my mind forever now. I've been running my hands through my hair / over my head constantly while reading this thread to reassure myself that I am not a disgusting human. This isn't as bad as some that I have read, but it remains with me to this day and is one of the reasons I didn't take up hairdressing after college. I was doing a full head of highlights. I had sectioned the client's hair and was working up from the nape of her neck. A few foils up, about level with the tops of her ears, I had the section of hair ready to be foiled. I placed the foil up against her scalp with my comb and flattened her hair against the foil ready to add the color. As I went to apply the color I noticed pus running down the foil from her scalp. It looked like I had loosened an ingrown hair or something because I was holding the hair quite taut to the foil. I started getting tunnel vision and went kinda lightheaded, but I wanted to stay professional so I powered through it. I just slapped the color on and folded the color / pus monstrosity into the foil and tried to forget about it when it came round to washing the foils out. This one actually made me quit hairdressing and join the Navy. Guy comes in for a $7.95 cut and his hair was so greasy and he had scabs and sores and huge crusts all over his head, but didn't want to pay the extra $1 for the shampoo. I shampooed him anyway with tea tree shampoo and it took everything in me to not puke on his head. Of course no tip either. Another time I was perming this girl's hair and got to the very last rod and saw one single louse on her scalp. I had washed and cut and sectioned her entire head, and that was the only one on there. Since it was 1989, I don't remember how we handled it. One more for the road. Was cutting a guy's hair. When I got to the side, he wanted the sides level with where his ears met his head, so I make the cut and something fell off, and then there was blood and I'm freaking out. It was this huge mole type thing and I cut the entire thing off. He thanked me and said now I don't have to go to a doctor to get it taken off. Shudders. Edit because I remembered something else, just remembered the guy with the prosthetic ear. He didn't even tell me. It was secured into his head somehow and looked real enough until I tried to comb near it and my comb hit something hard. Current hairdresser here. An elderly client of mine had major surgery on her head just before she started seeing me as her regular hairdresser. I had been doing her hair for years. I was able to tell her how her scar was looking. Sometimes it would start looking red/inflamed. I was able to see it, tell her, and she would go see her doctor that week. Last year, a screw had made its way out of her skull, and was popping through her head. She said she couldn't feel it. I told her that she had to see her doctor ASAP. She came back 2 weeks later and claimed the doctor said it wasn't an issue, and to just keep an eye on it. Edit, I took a picture and showed my client so she could see what I was talking about. Found it. Edit again, thank you so much for the gold. Your awesome smile. Not a hairdresser, but I'm fairly certain I was a horror story. I was severely neglected when I was younger, mother on heroin, dad an alcoholic, etc. Anyway, I had terrible head lice, so bad that they were eating away at my ears and my hair became fused to my ears. I remember sitting there crying as I watched her reaction in the mirror. Never felt so ashamed in my life, and I was only 9 or 10. To this day I can't have anything touching my ears. Few things. Pillar cysts. Like regular cysts but a lot harder. Most of the time you can't see them until you are washing their hair and you feel a grape-sized hard lump on your head. It doesn't bother me once I know it's there, but it still freaks me out when I first feel it. Dry scalp. Dry scalp come from lack of moisture or skin conditions, usually the former. Many people believe it's dandruff, so they use Head and Shoulders shampoo, which, from what I've seen, makes it worse. So my comb always gets skunked up with their dry flakes and I always have to throw the comb away. Dandruff. The true waxy, yellow stuff. I find it on young kids who are too old to have their parents wash their hair, but too young to not know how to properly wash it. So the oil builds up and forms a wax. Real bad cases are actually fungi. It traps the hair in the wax, and unless I do a full search before the haircut, I accidentally run my comb through, snag and pull on a piece, resulting in a quiet "owie" from the kid. I usually inform the parents and try to gently comb it out so I can proceed to the haircut. Then after I just tell them to go to their doctor to get a better diagnosis, since I am not a medical professional and I can't tell if it is just from lack of washing or a fungus. I briefly worked as a stylist at a retirement home. One day I was doing this really old lady's hair, like so old. She didn't communicate, she was totally non-responsive, and as I'm putting her rollers in I notice that her nose is completely covered in huge black heads that are sticking out of her face a good 1/8-1/4 inch. Her nose looked like a porcupine, totally covered in these huge spiky black heads. I felt so bad because the caretakers weren't helping her with it. But luckily that's the grossest thing I've seen so far anyways. I was working on braiding a section of a girl's hair for an updo. She was white, and it generally seemed clean and tangle-free. Then I came across a section of her hair that was completely matted to her scalp. I commented on it, and she says, "Oh yeah, that's beer. I forgot about it." I could not find words for my shock. Edit, autocorrect betrayed me. Obligatory not a hairdresser. My barber was telling me how just last week a man with thick dreads came in to get them cut and have a fade done. She told me the amount of dead skin and food in the dreads was sickening. That doesn't even take the cake though, he apparently had a full-length hot Cheeto stuck in one of them. She asked if he wanted to throwing away and he said he was going to keep it and put it on a plaque on his shelf. Edit for some extra nastiness I remembered. My grandfather had skin cancer on his left ear and it made the entire area around it extremely sensitive. He had a special barber that would be extra sensitive around it, but sadly enough she moved. He came to me and asked if I could cut it since I used to cut my own hair. At the time I didn't know how bad it was, that is until I went to cut it only to realize his skin was pulsing and would probably popped if I touched it. I proceeded with the haircut but man I wanted to throw up so bad. Obligatory not a hairdresser. This is my favorite lice story. Although it's actually my only one but whatever. I was in Tesco with my husband, just browsing the sandwiches as you do, when in rolls a lady in a wheelchair with her husband. I don't pay much attention until they roll right in front of me so I can't see the sandwiches. The first thing I notice is the smell. It was pee mixed with BO to an astounding degree. So far so gross, but the worst is yet to come. I'm annoyed because now I can't see if the cheese looks better than the prawn so I decide to bugger off and come back in a minute. Before I leave I glance down at the woman. Her hair is moving, which is weird because she's rolled to a stop. I do a double take because I'm not sure what I'm seeing and concentrate a bit harder. Yep, her hair is moving. I managed to get a bit closer, God knows why. Her entire head is crawling, literally crawling with lice so big they're visible from about 4/5 feet away. Not only are they sliding up and down her hair, they're wandering around her shoulders and her arms too. How she isn't bothered I don't know because it's making me itch just remembering it. I have never seen anything like it before or since. Put me right off my sandwich.